Hi everybody, and thanks for watching. Today I'd like to talk about installing a 10 by 20 by 8 foot tall auto shelter, also known as instant garage or garage in a box. This one is made by ShelterLogic, and I found it to be the best value for the size. Current going rate for this is around $270, and you can buy it off Amazon, or mine have mostly come through Menards, and I've taken advantage of the in-store discount, which I think will save you around 10 or 11%. I can't remember. It's been a little while. I haven't bought one in a while, but you might want to check on that availability, and if you can pick them up locally from Menards, you'll save yourself some money. One of the first things you'll notice if you read the manual is that the anticipated installation time is around 2 hours. In reality, after the dozen or so I installed, you probably ought to plan on more like 6 to 8 hours, including ground preparation, depending on what you have to do there. You want to pick a nice level spot, and it's going to be bigger, quite a bit bigger actually than a 10 by 20, to give yourself some room for installing the tarp and just being able to work around the area to get it installed. One of the other things I want to notice or point out to you is that the kit comes with a door that has zippers on one end only, so the other end is what I call a fixed door. You're not going to be able to open it. But if you call ShelterLogic, and there's a number inside on the manual, you can buy just the zippered door as a separate unit, which you can put on the other end for about $60, or at least at the time of this video. And that'll give you the option to have a door on both ends, which is really handy, because if you're running equipment, especially equipment you're driving into the shed, it's good to be able to open up both ends of it, just to allow the exhaust and fumes to go out. So I would highly recommend that. The other thing I saw in another video where a wooden rod was installed for rolling up the door, and that is really handy. I have yet to actually use that, but I want to, and put it in some of the sheds I already got installed, because it's hard to roll up that door just by yourself. So if you put that wooden rod in there, it allows you to roll it up by yourself a little bit easier. And I've seen some sheds that actually hook up a pulley system, and you can pull down a piece of string and it will roll it up for you, just kind of like a set of window blinds, which is really handy too. But that takes a little more work. I'd recommend putting the dowel or the rod in there on the door. It has a pocket on the bottom just for that, but the box does not come with that as an option to add that to it, so you have to buy that separately. The other thing to keep in mind with this is that you really want to avoid installing it in a high wind area, or an area that gets a lot of direct sunlight, because it tends to degrade the tarp material. And the tarp material is really not a lot better than kind of your cheap tarp material that you might get for a cover from say Tractor Supply or Harbor Freight. It's maybe like one step up from their lowest level tarp, so it's not a real strong material. They claim it has rip stoppability built in, and I've seen where some have ripped, and it does tend to mitigate the rip, or limit it down to a smaller area, but again, not real high quality or heavy sort of tarp material. But of the few I put in, of the dozen I put in, I would say I've only had trouble with one so far, after some of them being 5 or 6 years old now. And with that being said, I would definitely recommend installing this as an option to give you some more weather elimination for any equipment you want to put in there. So let's watch the rest of the video and take a look at what you need to do to install this successfully, and hopefully you guys will have some good luck with it. After you separate all your nuts and bolts, I'd recommend laying out all the parts in separate piles so that you can find them. Unfortunately, what you'll run across with this shed is some of these numbers that are just not legible. You have to match up the tubes, and some of them are pretty close, but it will really help you in the end to help speed things up. The other thing I would recommend is having at least 1 or 2 battery powered drill drivers. And 11 millimeter is your size for this type of shed. You don't really need to tighten up any bolts or nuts till the end. I'd recommend not doing that because it slows everything down, and sometimes you need to loosen them up. Therefore, just wait till the end and then tighten everything. The only problem is sometimes when you have the canvas over top, you can't get access to the upper top bolts and nuts very easily, but it is doable. And I'd also recommend getting 2 almost teenage boys to help you that are very enthusiastic and willing and happy to help.
Okay, make sure to edit that part out.
And on these corners, which are the left and right corners of your shed, these actually do go one way. You can't flip them this way and that. You can see this side here is a little bit shorter than this side. They're pretty close and they're easy to get turned around. Pay attention to that and I'll avoid having to take it apart later on. Here's the next important step you don't want to skip over, and that's making sure your garage is going to be square when it's done. Measure the corners are 22 feet 4 inches, and then you want to make sure your width is roughly 10 feet across. Then once you have that, you can go ahead and start putting the ground anchors in. So let's measure our corners and make sure we're at 22 feet 4 inches. All right there. Now go to the other one and do the same thing. Okay, now let's check the width to make sure it's 10 feet between the two. Same thing in the corner where it's 9, makes the 90. Alright, it's got to go in a little bit. And let's go check this other one. Now we'll set our ground anchors. The way the manual has this set up, you're supposed to take these ground anchors and put them in by hand with a piece of rebar or a piece of pipe, which is fine. I haven't actually done that. I prefer to use this tool, and I'll link this in the description, which makes it a lot easier to put these in. And of course, most of this depends on what type of ground you have. As to whether or not you're going to be able to put them in by hand or with a drill driver for that matter. And you just kind of got to eyeball this straight. A lot of times these ground anchor shafts aren't straight. This is actually a reused one, so it's already bent. Make sure you tighten that good so that it doesn't get loose on you when you're going down. And sometimes you just have to find the right spot. It may not be exactly where you want to put it in, but just try there. And if you can't, you might need to move it over. Sometimes I set the ratchet so that in case it does hit a rock or something, it doesn't put too much torque back into you. And if you end up doing a lot of these sheds, this will just make a lot quicker work of these ground anchors. And this is somewhat of a universal tool, which will allow you to do other anchor types, including the vortex, the orange screw, ice augers, things like that. Okay, we need a ground anchor at each corner. And you want to make sure the drill driver you use has got variable speed, which most of them do if they're battery powered. But if you end up using one of the old school on-off type drill drivers or drills, you got to really be careful with this. I'd recommend not doing that, just because it whips it up too fast and you might end up hitting yourself or something. And it also goes to maximum torque, which could be a problem if you hit a rock. Fortunately, so far we've had good ground here, so it makes it easy to put these in. But it also makes it so they don't hold as much if the ground is mostly sand like we have here.